Okay, let's get going. Welcome to my second Webcast. We're going to look at ModSecurity and the OWASP call rule Z today. I'm going to talk about the recent CRS security releases. We're going to look at GeoIP, so the lookup of the geolocation, the country code of IP addresses in your log files. And then we're going to look at production logs again, the logs we've seen last month. We're going to look at the same server, see if we've any differences. We're going to combine this with the GeoIP that I'm introducing earlier in the webcast. And then we're going to identify a couple of serial offenders. I did this in the morning, so this is well prepared. And then we're looking at progress in the false positive analysis script and how you can use that in production now. And then the multi-event view of the CRS software. So I'm going to start to share my screen and take off my helmet. Before I dive into this, people have, in the feedback, I was asked why I'm not taking questions. I'm going to take questions this time. Please post them in the chat. And afterwards, I'm going to pick them and respond to them. Additional question, if there is not enough time, just fire them via email. I'm taking time to respond via email afterwards. And then somebody asked me whether the IP addresses that you can see from our production log are the real IP addresses. No, they're obfuscated or they're anonymized. So they look like real IPv4 IP addresses, but they're in fact randomized. They're not the real IP addresses. This will be a topic today because the GeoIP no longer works because the IP address that you see on the screen does not correspond to the GeoIP information anymore because the IP address has to be anonymized. So that's that. Let's look at the security releases first, and then we'll take this away from there. So if we go to the call rule set website, there was a blog post with the CRS version 3.3.3 and 3.2.2 covering several CVEs. In the previous webcast in September, I talked about the ModSecurity update and how ModSecurity had released a security update. This is now the complementary CRS update. We had to, or CRS had to wait for ModSecurity to release because ModSecurity had to fix a few things in the engine. And then CRS had to come up with one or two additional rules to make use of new functionality in ModSecurity that was needed to cover this security problems. One of these problems I mentioned last month, and I'm covering two in more detail now, two additional ones. So if you look at the blog post, it speaks of this version. However, the week afterwards, there was already a bug fix release. So 3.3.3 and 3.2.2 had a bit of an issue with a few scoring variables. That's no big deal, but 3.3.4 and 2.3 are little updates to fix this scoring issue. The important thing is that you update at all, whether it's now the latest or the 3.3.3 or 3.2.2, doesn't matter too much. And the security release is the one in this blog post. There is a separate blog post about the small problems afterwards. So this is covering with great detail the 4 CVEs and a few additional security fixes that are not meeting CVE level from our perspective. But also the ModSecurity to security release is explained in more detail in this blog post, more detail than ModSecurity would explain it themselves. They were relatively casual and they would not highlight the importance, the security importance, the severity of the release. We're trying to cope with that and we're giving you additional information. So we have 4 CVEs. The first one is about multiple char sets in the content type header. How can you do that? The content type header is when you do a file upload or you submit a form, and then you can indicate, look, the form that I'm submitting is coming in the UTF-8 char set. And the call rule set comes with a list of allowed char set from the content type header. Let's look into that. I'm going to open the default config file. And here you have commented out, because default value, the allowed request content type char set. So what is here commented out is now active. I think I need to share it. Yeah, screen is shared. So these are the allowed char sets. This is readable char sets, they're also human readable, and the regular expression CRS are able to deal with that. Now, if you invent a new content type, or use a rarely used content type here, CRS will block this. Now, a guy discovered, I think it was Terjang again, discovered a way to submit two char set on the same line. So you do a char set, you say it's UTF-8, and then additional char set where you say, hey, and now I'm bringing you UTF-7. Now CRS had a weakness where it would look for the first char set, match this with the allow list and say, hey, that's fine. When in fact, it was encoded with a different char set. And CRS would no longer be able to have any pattern matches with the regular expression engine on that. And then the backend might decode it with the second char set indication. So the reverse proxy, the web application firewall on the backend would look at different char set parameters. And that's, of course, a big problem. It's a highly severe security issue. That's why we have a CVE 2022-39955. And the next one is the one that is combined with the ModSecurity update. You need to run the latest ModSecurity in order to be able to use the CRS fix here. If you're not able to do that, then you can simply remove the rule file. Of course, you're still affected by the security problem here, but at least you have the other security problems covered. So maybe you're in a system where you cannot update ModSecurity, then this gives at least 70% coverage. So it's better than nothing. The third CVE is the one I'm going to talk about as well. How does that work? The char set accept header field can be used to indicate, hey, look, backend, I'm happy with anything you send me, but please encode it in the following way. Char set again. Now, CRS again looks at the response body, and looks for error messages, for example, Java stack traces or anything. And if that response is encoded in a non-natural, not frequently used char set, then CRS is basically blind. So using this optional char set header field on the accept header, you can bypass the CRS response rules. This is rarely used. That's why there is no rule around for this. And here CRS closes that hole, so that is no longer possible. Final one, the fourth CVE, is a range header. You can issue a very small byte range in a range header, and if the backend supports that, it could give you only like 2 bytes of an error page. And then, of course, you would bypass CRS rules again. The response bodies can, based on the 2 bytes, it wouldn't discover anything. And if you cut up the response in many, many slices, then you can rearrange them afterwards to get the full Java stack trace without CRS detecting it. So we've covered that hole as well. However, that only happens in paranoia level 3. Range header are not really frequently used anymore. And in paranoia level 3, we start to deny them altogether, because it's really hard to determine what is a useful, a realistic range header and what is not. We've done the easy tour now, and we no longer allow it, but only from paranoia level 3. I think it's quite an exotic attack, but kind of works. And if it does, then the response rules are basically bypassed. Very good. So that's the CRS release, the security release. Please update to the latest versions. We're covering the 3.3 release line and the 3.2 release lines. If you're still sitting on older release lines, and we know that certain cloud integrators are using older release lines, we're sorry that we cannot provide you with help. You have to ask their support. You have to ask them to update their CRS to the latest supported release lines. Good. With that being said, let's move over to the GeoIP stuff. I'm almost done with the blog post, but I couldn't publish it today. I was preparing the webcast, so I'm going through this now. On my screen, you see a couple of IP addresses. And the IP addresses, I mean, it's just a random number for me. I cannot, I mean, I know localhost and then a couple of DNS resolvers and maybe my own wide IP address, but these numbers don't mean a thing to me. However, if we accompany that with the country code of these IP addresses, look, it's now the same IP addresses on the screen, but a country code. And I see a pattern emerging. There are apparently 3 US IP addresses, a couple of European countries. It becomes more tangible. An IP address with a country code is a tangible IP address. It's an IP address that makes sense to me. And if I'm looking at production use of a web application firewall, it's a huge difference if it's a far away exotic country where I don't have customers in doing triggering alert, or a local country code where no, hey, this could be a user on my online shop. So that adds information. It becomes tangible. It adds context. So this is relatively important. If you're familiar with my online tutorials, then you know that the log format I'm proposing is carrying an empty slot for the GeoIP country code, but it's not filled in my tutorials. I never explained how to do this. So I've now written the blog post. I'm going to publish today, maybe tomorrow, how to fill this actually. There are multiple ways to fill this, and I'm going to present the preferred way to do this. ModSecurity is able to do lookup by itself, or rather it was capable to do that. Why is this no longer the case for the ModSecurity 2.9 release line? This is because the standard database you use for GeoIP lookup, the MaxMind database, changed the format. Years ago, actually, they carried on with the old format, but now they stopped. And ModSecurity 2.9 is not supporting the new format. That is different from ModSecurity 3, there you covered. For ModSecurity 2.9, that is no longer covered. So now what you can do is reformat the database, and there are a few hacks around to do that. I'm linking that in my blog post. I can look that up. Or you do the lookup differently. Personally, I'm not a big fan of ModSecurity doing the lookup of IP addresses, because I think that's not core WAF functionality. And MaxMind, the distributor of this database, is actually providing an Apache module to do the lookup. So I'm rather using that database. How do you get this database? You can register yourself at MaxMind. Unfortunately, you have to register, but then you get a free download link or a license key, so you can download the database regularly. For production use, I recommend paying the license. It's not overly expensive, even for very large sites. And then you get a database where you can look up here on the screen now. You see how this is downloaded. Here's the config file. It's just 3 lines. Here I indicate I want to have the country code and the network identifier as well. That is separate. I'm coming to that in a second. This gives me this database here. It's a couple of megabytes large. Of course, it's a huge binary tree. That's why it's not so big. And I can look it up. I have a little script that does it for me on the command line. And then we move over to the Apache and the ModSecurity configuration. This is how you configure this. It's relatively simple. You enable the MaxMind module, and then you give a link or a path to the database. And then you tell the module, look up the country code and please write it into an environment variable. And then the same for the network zone. And then we can use this in the log file. This would be the combined log format, and this is the extended log form that I'm introducing in my tutorials. Where I'm putting this, I'm putting it here. I'm putting it right next to the IP address. Why here? Because this field is not used. This is never used in a modern web server, so it's up for grabs. And I just replaced the empty field with a geo-IP country code. And that way, the IP address is always accompanied by the country code. I think that's really neat. And then I can write mod security rules against it. Like this one, for example, it says, hey, Switzerland and the neighboring countries are denied access. It's really simple. I'm looking for the my variable, the geo-IP country code, and then I do a parallel match for the following country code. Switzerland is CH, in case you're not familiar with that. This is Austria, Germany, and so on. I mean, I don't really like to do this generally. However, in a denial of service situation, application denial of service, that could make sense. Usually, you would do it the other way around. The other way around would say, if it is not Poland or the UK, for example, this is now the denial of service situation where you say, hey, we're attacked from thousands of bots globally. We cannot block this on the network level. This has to hit the WAF. This is an application level problem. And the WAF will simply say, hey, IP lookup, if you're not a Polish or a UK IP address, then we're denying you. So the exclamation mark is the negation, of course. So here you make an allow list of geo-IP country codes that are allowed on your server. More or less useful. What you could also do is combining this with a core rule set. So you would define different anomaly thresholds. I don't like this very much. I think it makes things much more complicated and very hard. But I've indicated recipes. If you want to experiment with that, maybe it's useful for you, it's there. A final thing before I close this, the rules have to be in phase 2. They have to be in phase 2 because the mod security phase 1 is running before the MaxMind module is running. So if you want to do this in mod security, you have to put it in phase 2, or you have to patch either mod security or the MaxMind module. It's really simple. Here is the diff. It's just a single line that is changed. Here in the MaxMind module, we simply say, hey, mod security 2.c should run after our module. And this gives us access to the geo-IP country code in phase 1, so the first mod security phase. Very good. So that much on geo-IP. Now let's move over to the production logs and see what has happened there. I've run the log analysis beforehand for a full month. This takes like 4 or 5 minutes on my machine. The view hasn't changed much. We're still in text mode here. And let's look at a couple of numbers. We have roughly the same number of requests. We block almost every request that triggered an alert. There are only a handful of requests that triggered an alert that were not blocked. Why is that? There are very low anomaly scores, like 2. On this service, repeat, this is netnea.com, so this is the site where I'm running my tutorials. I run with a CRS anomaly threshold of 3. However, if you only score 2, like a missing accept header, for example, small offense for CRS scores 2, it gives you only 2 points, and then you would not be blocked. That's why we have a couple of in here. However, the ones that are blocked are over 9,000. That's, of course, that's the important ones. And they are all blocked, the hard ones, the real attacks. The rest looks roughly the same. Yeah, skip this. 97% of the requests are not scoring. They're benign users. That's okay. We have a large number of get, very few posts. I've seen this before. Then a little change. If you look up the previous numbers in previous webcast, we have less gets. I used to have 8 gets by mid-September, and now from the month from mid-September to mid-October, I'm down to 4%. I looked into this, and I can't really see a structural difference. It's simply less. It's in fact, it's 15,000 less redirects. I'm not really sure why that is the case. And then I gave up. I mean, it doesn't matter too much. What is still the same is IO in, out, duration, all sane. Here, I have a couple of 500s. Yes, we didn't have any 500s last week. This was experience. I was testing something and triggered a few 500s. CAPEC categories, so in which categories are the rules or the attacks that trigger ModSecurity? The top entries are the same. Protocol manipulation, input data manipulation are the highest ones. What is lower is path traversal, only 200. I think there was 400 or 500 last time around, but it's basically the same picture. Here you see a category that is not mapped. So this is how it's coming from CRS, and the log report script does the mapping. I have to update this for this CAPEC category. Good, then more rules, top rules. Yeah, let's look at these ones. These are not CRS rules. Across all requests, I'm getting a lot of 403s on non-application requests. What is that? That is a special reporting rule that looks at the status code. And if it's a non-application request, an application on NEA is /CMS. The whole web server runs under /CMS. So if you're scoring a 403 and you're not on CMS, then you're an attacker anyways, because there is no content out there. And that is a special rule that allows me to identify attackers really easily, because they will all fall into here if they're attacking something that is not existing on the server. And then I've done an additional rule called the unwanted URIs. There are certain URIs that are really hammered on this service. It's a WordPress site, and they're hammering, the attackers, bots, security scanners are hammering certain URIs a lot. WordPress URIs, and that I'm not even using. Standard remote procedure call, for example, on WordPress, they're using this like crazy. And I say, hey, that's unwanted. We're not using that functionality. If you're using that functionality, then you're an attacker. So these are 2 custom rules that really cover thousands of attacks. Look at that. 6,000 times this was triggered when we had only like 15,000 alerts anyways. So these rules are highly effective and really trigger a lot, namely this one. I mean, this is a reporting rule, but the second one, the unwanted URIs, identify so many attacks. The other one that might be interesting, yes, this is new, the 920.610, the illegal header except charset. Except charset is a legacy header that is deprecated, and it's considered an attack header. Nobody, and namely no browser, is supposed to use this anymore. And we had a CRS vulnerability on that header as well, so we made it an illegal header. Now, in the latest security release, this is becoming illegal. And we see this a lot by security scanners, surprisingly a lot. I haven't seen a real false positive. I haven't seen a legitimate use of this except charset header, but if you're updating, you're going to see this alert a lot. And this is new because of the security update. If you think the header should be allowed, then you update the CRS setup conf and you allow it again, and then please report, because we see these alerts a lot, but we think these are really attackers or crazy outdated browser, like 10, 15 years old browsers. Good, that much from that. And now let's look at false positives again. Do we have new false positives? I go to the false positive script. I have demonstrated that last month, and I'm running this again. I've consolidated. You see the help output here. It's now easier to use in production. I indicate the threshold. They give me a threshold of 5. The config file is going to be here. So it comes with its own config file. And then I give it the error log and the access log, and then let it run. I have the 385,000 requests. You've seen this before, and then it's already done. I'm moving over to the browser and showing you, where are we here? The browser temp. So this is the output as HTML formatted. So 385 requests, filtering down. I've explained this last month through multiple steps. We're filtering down to a handful of alerts. So we started out with 20, 30,000 alerts, and now we're down to 5 requests that need manual intervention. I know the first 2 of these. I'm making the screen a bit smaller, a bit more narrow, like this. Yeah, like this. 5 requests. The first one is my own IP address. I know that. And this was in end of September. I remember triggering false positive. That is not overly interesting. The same is true for the second one. And there was a new false positive on the latest. I'm running bleeding edge nightly build CRS. There was a new rule introduced. But the next ones are more interesting. The script is flagging this as a potential false positive because it cannot really make sense of this. So it thinks, hey, look, I've applied all the filters now, but this South Africa, or is it Zambia IP address is looking like a legitimate request, and you have to look it up if this is a false positive. I'm clicking on this, and this is taking me to CRS. You've seen it before. So this is our software that allows us to work on this, to work and create rule exclusions. And here it says, hey, let's not do a rule exclusion. You should update the CRS setup conf if it is, in fact, a false positive. But I'm looking more closely now. I see, no, that's not the case. Look, the guy has a single quote in the URI. Interesting. Of course, CRS saw this, but actually it triggered on the allowed request content type. So this was a request. I'm going back here. It's a post request on the WordPress. No, it's down here. No, it's a GET request with a funny URI and a content type. Why would you do a GET request with a content type in the first place? So this was rightly flagged as an attack, and the script thinks it might be a false positive, but that is not the case. Next one. Here you see this is US IP address, and I'm doing additional information here. I'm having the network code and the network organization. So this is now even more detailed than only the country code. And here I have 2 slashes. So that is, of course, also not permitted on this server. I don't have URIs with 2 slashes. So this is not a false positive. And then the last one, yes, this would be a false positive. Unix shellcode found, or it was an attempt by myself. It's my own IP address. Yes, I used args-exec, probably with bin bash or something as an attack. Yes, bin bash here. So I tested this myself. This is a mobile IP address that I've used. Good. So coming back to this, it is now more comfortable to use. I have more command line options. Showing you this again, I can now give additional ignore patterns on the command line, and that works as follows. I would tune away something, and then I would take this and then run the script again. And I would now say, hey, please ignore this unique ID. Ignore the following request. We used to have 5 alerts, and now we're running only 4. And then I'm tuning away the next false positive, or I decide, hey, look, this is not a false positive, and then the Zambia guy as well. And now it should be down to 2 or so. Works, down to 2. So this becomes more comfortable. You can now really add this into an iterative loop over your alerts. Final thing I'd like to show you, I'm running web server quickly. I'm attacking the web server, stopping the web server again, and then show me 2 alerts. 2 alerts for this attack. These are real attacks now. That's etc pass WD. But I want to paste these 2 items now into the CRS. I'm cleaning this, and then I'm pasting 2 of them in here. And now this is new. CRS now has a multi-event view. Here is the first alert, the 930.120 OS file attempt, and then Unix shellcode found as well. So CRS now allows you to do 2 or multiple ones, of course, multiple alerts on the same screen. I think that makes sense if a request obviously triggers more than 1 alert, and then you're familiar with that probably already. Here you compose your rule exclusion by rule, copy paste it, or post it as a webhook, copy to clipboard as I've demonstrated before. I'm slowly coming to an end. I might take 1 or 2 questions. We're running over time, but I'll still do that. Before I'm closing this, the next public course date. So if you want to learn more about ModSecurity core rule set, and now including the GeoIP, I'm going to include this in my teaching in the future. Here is the next course. We're going to do the public next course at the end of November. I'm announcing this as an online course. It might become on-site. I have 3 people interested, and they have an interest in on-site course. So it's supposed to be online, but maybe it's going to be on-site. If you're interested, either or, please drop me a line or book the course immediately via the website. The online course and the public on-site would be the same as 18 or 1900 US dollars. If we're changing the format, the price will stay the same, of course. Good. So that much is that. And now let's look if we have interesting questions. I don't see any questions at all. Maybe I was so clear, or I give you another minute to ask a question in the chat. If you have one, thank you, Edgars, for the helmet. Yes, that's a very nice helmet. As a few of you might know, I'm doing medieval reenactment. So I'm a medieval reenactment company. I have my kit of armor. We go to museums and do medieval display. And that helmet is a 15th century helmet. As it happens, it was made by a Russian blacksmith that fled Russia at the beginning of the war in March. And he's now, I think he now lives on the Balkans somewhere, and he's looking for people interested to buy helmets from him. If you're interested, drop me a mail and I can connect you to a very good blacksmith who is really fantastic worker and armorer. Okay, I don't see any additional questions coming in. The question is, will this be available, and the previous records as well? Yes, I'm going to send it out probably during the week, early next week. It's going to be on YouTube, and also the link again on the previous webcast. Okay, And with this, I thank you very much for attending. And yeah, see you again at the mid of November. I'm going to send out the meetup links. And thank you very much for attending. Goodbye and good luck.